evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Dr. Ergin Koçyıldırım. Dr. Koçyıldırım is an assistant professor at the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at the University of Pittsburgh in the United States. He'll be joining us to evaluate the year of the pandemic in Turkey. But first, let's take a look at the latest numbers. According to the data released by the Ministry of Health, the daily number of new cases on March 11th has been announced as 14,046 and the number of deaths as 63. These numbers have led to the total number of cases to reach 2,835,989 and the death toll to become 29,290. We have also prepared a short video highlighting the year's developments in relation to the fight against the pandemic in Turkey. Let's take a look at the video and then Dr. Koçyıldırım.
Hello, Dr. Koçyıldırım. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Koçyıldırım, at first glance, how do you remember this past year? What are your general impressions when you look back at this year fighting against the pandemic and managing the pandemic in Turkey?
Thank you very much. As you know, yesterday was the anniversary of the pandemics. It was after 1 year, and a year ago we were hit by a virus that we had no clue about it, and this virus kept us silenced and spread unchecked and uncontrollably. So at first, it was. I believe it was like end of December, World Health Organization just informed the, globally information about this outbreak. And after a month or days and weeks of denial, we came to the point that it was a pandemic. So I think that the first reaction was quite late. So all the suspicious events and all the transmission from animals to human to human transmission was already shown, especially by the first half of January. But unfortunately, the world was aware of this outbreak by March. So it changed our lives very much. We were just checking some pictures with my wife yesterday, and it was like completely a different era. So we missed all our social days and hugging people, kissing people, having parties and, dinners and lunches, suppers. So yes, it's like in another era, but at the moment, this pandemic just taught us a lot of things, both scientifically, politically, socially. So we know that after 1 year, science won. So it was an era that the politics and science were so very close to each other, but we realized that science was always the winner. So nobody was expecting a vaccine available before the end of the year, but after 9 months, science showed that vaccines are available, and now there's a huge vaccination program in all over the world. Unfortunately, we lost our loved ones. So many people lost their lives. And if you look at the numbers in the US, as of today, we lost 527,000 people. So it's more than 500,000. And the number of deaths is more than the World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, and 9/11 combined. So it's a lot of people lost their lives. And there's a Kaiser Foundation poll, and they ask people some questions, and the responses were quite interesting. 3 out of every 10 Americans lost somebody that already know due to COVID-19. So it's very sad. But after all those collective sacrifice, collective suffering, now we are going to a new era that with the vaccination efforts, I think that things will change soon. So again, as of today, the number of vaccinations performed in the US is more than 98 million. And almost 100 million doses will be done in a day. And last Saturday was a record in the US that in a single day, there were all 2.9 million doses of vaccinations performed in 24 hours. So I think it's also a different era now, because we just spent a year with President Trump and his administration, and we saw a lot of mistakes and denials. And now it's a complete new administration that we really, it's like a new page for the American history, especially for the pandemic management. So when President Biden came to the office, he promised to have 100 million doses by the end of his first 100 days. And today is his 50th day, and it's almost 88 million doses has been performed. So I think by his 100th day in the office, the total number will be more than 150 million doses. And he just did a very interesting anniversary speech yesterday, because it's also the anniversary of the shutdown in the US. So 11th of March was also the day for the announcement of the pandemic, to the global pandemic, but also it's the day for the start of the lockdowns in the US. So he did a very good speech, and it was a speech that we missed for a long time. And there's also an American rescue plan. He just ordered this plan. It means that most of the Americans will get $1,400. So a family of 4 will get $5,600. And this checks has been started to send by probably 2 days ago. So people will receive this. So now I think there's a huge support to President Biden and his administration and his pandemic management. So after all those sufferings and sacrifices, I think things have started to change. And but again, we just remember our loved ones, lost ones, because this year they didn't even have a funeral. So people left their loved ones and their grief behind without a funeral. Mm-hmm. And also, it's also good to think about the natural causes, the death from the natural causes or accidents or other diseases. Again, those people just didn't have any funeral as well. So it was a sad year overall. It's like a film scenario that we were like watching a movie. But in the US, things have started to change, and I think it's due to the vaccination efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a positive thing that at least the management of the pandemic can change with the change of governance. And even if it has been a year of quite a lot of suffering, as you mentioned, a lot of loss that could have been perhaps prevented. It's good that at some point there's a turning point, and in that sense. But when looking back at the management of the pandemic in Turkey, there's also, it's been criticized quite a bit for several different reasons. Could you perhaps summarize some of the good and some of the bad aspects of the management of the pandemic here in Turkey?
I think it's always good to start with the good things. Mm-hmm. And I think the devotion and dedication of the frontline workers and essential workers and healthcare workers was phenomenal in Turkey. I think the best thing and the only good thing that has happened during this pandemic management was the devotion, dedication, and their truthful efforts of those doctors, nurses, and all healthcare personnel. When it comes to the things that we could criticize is basically the pandemic management from the very first day was not very right, and the denial was very similar to the one in the US, because Turkish authorities just denied about the first cases and these scenarios. And maybe you're aware, I published an online book about the first 100 days of this pandemic. And I just wrote this book by looking only the publicly available information on the internet. And then what I found out that the very first case was actually detected in January 22nd. It was like months before then it was announced. So it was a Chinese tourist that was detected in Istanbul. And after finding that her test was positive, she was deported to Wuhan, back to China again. So it's also against the international law as well. You can't deport a patient in that situation, but they just want to cover up their findings. And so again, from the very first day, the Minister of Health Dr. Koca and his team and this scientific advisory committee was not very transparent, and they just always tried to show the things better than it was. And this really changed the perception of the disease by the Turkish, population. And Turks really would like to see each other, hug each other, kiss each other. And when they think that the disease was not as serious as it is, then people's, perception of disease has completely changed. So this really made the things different. And I think it's kind of, I can look into this management in Turkey in 3 different eras. So first one was just everybody was afraid. So it's just kind of a scary period that nobody has a clue. You're just fighting with an enemy that you don't see. You have no clue. It's very new. You don't have any drugs to, treat it. You don't have any vaccination. So the first era was something that we were all shocked. And then the second era is just a denial process, era that people just know it, but they denied, and the administration just opened and turned back their face to a normal life. And by June, when the numbers were really critical, they started to go back to normal because they had some expectations because of the summertime, bring more tourists and bring more income. So these are all the things that I think those poor decision making is ended by having a lot of patience. Mm-hmm. So the third era that I'm talking is just really people don't care right now, because after a long a year of shutdowns, lockdowns, and some limitations of life, when your administration says that, oh, things are going better, people just started to go out to meet each other. They don't really pay attention to the social distancing, masking, and other precautions. So in this 3 era, I think the missing thing was people really asking for the truth. They just want to know the truth, but the truth has never been mentioned. So every time they just discussed about their successful stories, and then they just talk about all the success stories. So everybody can make mistakes, even governments, even administrations. So it's always good to talk about your mistakes and get some lessons from your mistakes as well. But this has never happened. So I think the worst thing was, again, not having a trustful and transparent administration, but likewise, President Biden just mentioned that something about his visit to Philadelphia during his talk last night, and he met a small business woman in Philadelphia, and then he asked that woman that what she wants the most, and she just responded as, I just want to hear the truth, just the truth. So I want the truth. So I think Turks didn't face any truth during this pandemic management over the last year. They just they listened some really success stories of the government, how this, governmental hospitals were built, how many patients were treated, but they didn't really know the truth. So I think this is the worst thing that happened over the last year if we criticize how it was managed.
Yeah, transparency was something that all medical experts criticized very much so. And now we have entered the controlled normalization process as of March 1st, in line with a map dividing the provinces into risk groups. And in accordance, we have cafes and restaurants which have reopened. And this really is an economic relief. I mean, aside from the truth, this period has been a great burden for many people in Turkey, considering the limited aid that was provided by the government. So in that sense, despite the rising numbers, the opening is going to, has led to some sort of relief, both economically and psychologically. But as we said, the numbers are once again on the rise here in Turkey. So at this point in the pandemic, how is it possible to stay healthy at the same time and fight the pandemic while also relieving some sort of economic hardships?
This is a fantastic question, but I don't know where to start. But if we just focus on Turkey only, Turkey didn't have the right precautions when the pandemic is at its highest point. So we're just suffering now of all the bad decision making during that time. So when the vaccines and these shots became available, many countries just started to work with the vaccine manufacturers and to bring as many numbers as they can. And for example, Canada just ordered 10 times of the necessary vaccinations for their population. So I don't know if it's the right decision anyway, but I just want to give you an example from the US. So we had the worst numbers, and you remember maybe New York was like the eye of the pandemic, so it was the center of the pandemic. So we lost like more than 50,000 people only in New York area. So during that time, the government, the pandemic administration really took good precautions. So they locked down, people started to work from home. So they didn't really care about the economic too much, and they just closed down for weeks, and US was closed down for months. So now with the vaccinations effort, so you can just control, it's kind of a mitigation of this virus. Because it was like 11th of March, they realized that the containment of the virus was not enough, it was not possible. So they changed their plan from containment to the mitigation. So now the mitigation efforts is just controlled by the vaccination. So in the US, there were 2 mRNA vaccines, and one was Pfizer, BioNTech, and then the other one was Moderna. And government ordered 300 million doses each. And now they ordered 200 million doses of Johnson & Johnson. It's the third FDA emergency use approved vaccine. And they ordered 200 million. And yesterday, President Biden ordered another 100 million doses of vaccination. So, and I believe that by the end of this year, we will have more than 6 or 7 different brands of shots available in the US. But when we look into the Turkey's vaccination program, unfortunately, they have only one single brand. And it's Sinovac. It's a Chinese inactive brand vaccine. I'm not going to discuss about the effects here, but it looks like an effective vaccine. But unfortunately, we don't really have chance to read the phase 3 trials in Turkey, because phase 3 trials were performed in Brazil, in different countries, and also Turkey was one of the center. But they had to unblind that study before they planned, because the initial study was designed to do the second dose after 2 weeks, but they suddenly, because of these supply chain problems, they just extended to 28 days. And I believe that the vaccine program in Turkey just has 28 days between 2 shots. So the original study was designed for 2 weeks. They changed it to 4 weeks. So I don't know how the results are trusted and how we can just discuss their confidence level. So they had to unblind it because they realized that they have to start vaccination programs. So they probably didn't have chance to complete the whole phase 3 studies. And unfortunately, it was just, again, Minister of Health just made this announcement about the results, but as a scientist, I didn't have chance to read it. So it's just very interesting still. So I think the mistake for many countries are just trying to engage with only one single vaccine, because if you just sign a contract with one manufacturer, there might be some supply chain problems, there might be some production problems. And so I'm just gonna tell you that, for example, Mexico just signed contracts with 5 different manufacturers, vaccine manufacturers. Brazil is like this. So and even some poor South American countries usually has contract more than 2 to 3 different manufacturers. So still, I think the question that we should ask is why Turkey is just focusing on only one single brand. I think there might be some financial thoughts behind it. And because, the Minister of Health is not coming from a scientific background, he's coming from, from the business. So he was a businessman and the head of big, holdings and universities and schools and some construction companies. So they might have some trade plans behind this. So this should be asked. The other thing is just 2 weeks ago, he just did a press release, and during his talk, he just mentioned that by May, 50 million doses will be performed. And yesterday, he just, released a pre-recorded video, and he said that, okay, we're going to do this 50 million doses by, in the 3rd quarter of this year, and by fall. So things are changing, things are delaying. And I have very many friends, many loved ones in Turkey, and they say that we had our first dose, but we can't get the appointment for the 2nd dose. And the response that we were given is that there's no vaccine available. So these are all the questions needs to be asked to the administration. And I believe that without asking those questions, they should really inform the people and have their vaccination program. So when it comes to answer your question, if you have the right vaccination efforts, then you can just change the things, and then the normalization can be really can flow as it is. But now Turkey is kind of a lockdown country in terms of the vaccination. It can't really flow, and the daily numbers of the cases are increasing. It was like more than 14,000 cases yesterday. It's very worrying, and the deaths are reaching to really big numbers. So, and many friends, ICU workers and colleagues, they say that they reopened their ICU units, they reopened the spare units, and they are just trying to find more beds. So Turkey is not going to the right direction. I think the best thing to create a good normalization is just to speed up the vaccination efforts.
Dr. Koçyıldırım, just to make it clear, what are the advantages other than, are there other advantages of having more than deals with more than one manufacturer, other than the problems in perhaps the numbers and purchasing? I mean, in terms of applying those vaccines to the citizens, what would be the advantage of having more than one different kind of vaccine?
If you just have one single contract with one single manufacturer, then you rely on their resources. But if you just have more than one manufacturer, you can just have, let's say they had some issues in terms of their supply, then you can just turn your face to the other company and ask more. The other thing is, when it comes to the mRNA vaccines, you have to really keep them in cold. But the new vaccine, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or some other vaccinations can be kept in just a regular fridge in 4 degrees Celsius. So, and also when it comes to the financial things, that if you just have different contracts with different vaccines, then you can just get the cheaper vaccines too. Unfortunately, if you work with one single company, you just pay them a single amount. I think it's $12. It was announced, and you just pay $12. But Johnson & Johnson is just below $10, and AstraZeneca is just less than $3. So also, it's just about how not to waste your money. So if you work with different companies, you can have a better financial management in terms of your capital.
Okay, so from a business perspective, it makes sense to make deals with more than one supplier. And you mentioned, I mean, Minister Koca's addresses, and he had said actually that by June, 60% of the population will be vaccinated. By the end of March, we would have 4.5 million dosages of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. And so far, it doesn't seem, I mean, we have approximately 10% of the population that has been vaccinated, but as you said, this has slowed down. So do you think this is a problem with a mismanagement, or is there again here problems with transparency?
I think it's a blend of both. It's just because of not being transparent. And in many press releases and press meetings, many of your colleagues asked questions to the minister, and he said these are trade secrets, so he didn't want to just talk about them. So he just cut this out and he said, it's a trade secret. I will not give you any details about this. And the most surprising announcement by him was just, I'm not going to give any numbers, how many doses of vaccines we're going to have. So when you look at even the boxes, and if I think there is a distributor company in Turkey that just plays a role in bringing those, vaccines. So this distributor company's owner just made a press release like last week, and they said that, I think there was a discussion about $12 million, the first 1 million doses, because the company sent those, vaccines to here without getting paid. And I think the people just realized that, and they just asked, where is this $12 million? And the owner of that company just announced that it was their, startup cost. So I'm just assuming that if government is giving less than $1 million to the universities to bring up the, national vaccination program, why they pay $12 million to a distributor company as a startup cost. So these are the things that needs to be really discussed. And when it comes to the mismanagement part, yes, it's a completely mismanaged issue. Let's say now we are aware that different variants and mutations are, around. We have Brazilian, South African, UK variants, and they are more, infectious, and more people just are getting, infected by those variants. So the other thing is, if you just work with only one vaccine, you may not cover those variants. So I just have to tell you that Moderna has started a new vaccine that is very effective on the, these variants, and they are just doing their clinical trial. So maybe in a month or two, their new vaccines will be, slightly modified and will be effective to these new variants. But if you have only one virus, you may not be able to also protect your whole population against those new kind of mutations. So I think Turkey is a very unique country that has only one single, brand. Even China has more than 10 different, vaccine manufacturers. We are just criticizing Russia. Russia has more than 6 different vaccines available. Sputnik V is one of them. So they just keep not telling the truth, because they say we're going to just manufacture Sputnik V here. They were thinking that all phase 3 studies of the local vaccines will be done by the end of this month. So they're just all pushing and pushing, and I think people just lost their trust to the administration, especially to the Minister of Health. So I just read people's just responses on the social media that people are fed up with all those lies. I think it's time to have a brand new administration. And if it was a European country, if it was a minister in the US, or if it was a minister in Japan, probably we can assume that what would happen to a person who just completely, keep telling lies. But I am just so surprised that what is holding, Mr. Koca from resigning after all those scandals. So this is, people are really fed up with all those lies, and I'm just wishing all the best to the population. I think if there is going to be a new administration and new decision making, I can think that with the good health care in Turkey, many millions of doses could be done quickly. But you can only vaccinate people if you only have vaccines available. So I think it's time to a big change now.
Dr. Ergin Koçyıldırım, thank you so much for having joined us today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
On March 8th, thousands of women flooded the streets to proclaim a unified message of women's rights to mark International Women's Day. Following the 19th Feminist Night March in Istanbul, 12 women were taken into custody in a midnight operation for insulting the presidents with their slogans.
On March 8th, women gathered in various cities to commemorate International Women's Day. Along with the 19th Feminist Night March in Istanbul, there were women marches held in the cities of Ankara, Izmir, Antalya, Diyarbakır, and many more. International Women's Day is celebrated each year on March 8th, to advocate for women's rights and to highlight inequalities among men and women. Feminist night marches have been organized in Istanbul since 2003. This year, many roads and public transportation that lead to Istanbul's Taksim Square were closed in order to prevent the demonstrations to be held. The police blocked all streets leading to Taksim Square and Istiklal Avenue, where the march is traditionally held. The women held their demonstrations on the nearby Sıra Serviler Street instead. Medyascope anchor Gökçe Çiçek Kösedağı joined live from the feminist march and reported the developments on the scene to Medyascope viewers.
We are on a parallel street to Istiklal Avenue. Right now, women are trying to get to the Sıra Serviler Street. As you already know, Istiklal Avenue has been closed to the public since 2 p.m. today. This year's theme is "The Feminist Riot is Everywhere." Among the outstanding slogans, there are "Stop Femicides and Male Violence Against Women," "Istanbul Convention Keeps Us Alive," and "We Want Our Right to Alimony."
Women also held banners that read, "Femicides, assaults, and rapes are political, and we are not going to stay silent. We are not scared. We will not obey." The women who joined the march also clarified that this is not a celebration, but a fight for women's rights due to the ongoing violence and oppression towards women in the country. According to the women's advocacy platform, We Will Stop Femicides platform, in 2020, 300 women were killed as victims of femicide, and 171 women were found suspiciously dead. In the month of January 2021, 23 women lost their lives as victims of femicide, and 14 women were found suspiciously dead. In February alone, 28 women were killed as victims of femicide, and 12 women were found suspiciously dead. The women who organized the march released a statement after the march that said,
Despite everything, we were at the 19th Feminist Night March on the streets of Taksim on March 8th with our feminist rebellion, with all colors of the rainbow, against those who tried to divide us as acceptable and unacceptable. Together, we gave an answer to those who put police, which cannot be found when it comes to preventing violence against women, in front of us to close every street. We know that as we empower one another, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, male violence will go away, we will stay.
Women from Boğaziçi University were also present at the Feminist Night March and stood together against male violence, patriarchy, and homophobia. In addition, the Boğaziçi faculty returned the gifts given by the appointed rector Melih Bulu and put them in front of the rectorate building with a note that read, "We do not accept it." Days after the march was held, at midnight of March 11, 12 women participants were taken into custody after the police raided their houses. According to the Progressive Lawyers Association, 12 women were detained for insulting the president with the slogans of "Tayyip Run, Women Are Coming," and "Jump, Jump, Jump, Whoever doesn't jump is Tayyip." All detained participants were released on condition of judicial control late on March 11th. This midnight operation comes amid Erdogan's newly announced Human Rights Action Plan that called for an end to detentions out of working hours. On March 2nd, Erdogan had said that no citizens should be deprived of their freedom due to detention warrants just to take their statements. He had added that with the action plan, the proceedings for taking statements will be held 24/7.
Istanbul Metropolitan Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu's marking of International Women's Day on Twitter created discomfort among the opposition İYİ Party leaders. The controversy was sparked over İmamoğlu tagging the İYİ Party chair Meral Akşener and the People's Democratic Party co-chair Pervin Buldan in the same post.
On March 7, Mayor İmamoğlu tweeted, "I congratulate all women politicians and my counterpart mayors across Turkey on March 8, International Women's Day, as well as İYİ Party Chair Ms. Meral Akşener and HDP Co-Chair Ms. Pervin Buldan." Yavuz Ağıralioğlu, Deputy Chair of the İYİ Party, reacted to this post with discomfort, saying that they do not find it right to mention the names of HDP members with Meral Akşener. As a reason why, Ağıralioğlu said that HDP co-chair Buldan has not distanced herself from the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. The HDP is often accused by political parties for having links to PKK, a terrorist organization recognized by the European Union and the United States. İYİ Party is a breakaway party from the ultranationalist Nationalist Movement Party, an ally of the ruling Justice and Development Party, and is among the parties that believes HDP is a political wing of the terrorist organization. While Akşener did not respond to İmamoğlu's post, Buldan replied with a thank you note. Akşener responded to the debate around İmamoğlu's tweet with the following statements.
Mr. İmamoğlu shared a message, and our deputy Ergin reacted to this. Both come under freedom of thought. Most of my surroundings did not like it either, and I find them to be right.
İmamoğlu responded to the controversy around his celebratory tweet, saying that the message was written solely under good intentions and good feelings. Hazardost interviewed citizens around Istanbul's Fatih and Şişli districts, asking them their opinions on the debate around İmamoğlu's March 8 tweet. I am not an HDP supporter, neither have I voted for İmamoğlu. However, if İmamoğlu is celebrating someone's Women's Day, he can celebrate someone else's. I don't think there is any problem with this. I don't think he did this with bad intentions. But if there is a bad intention under it, it is his problem. We do not think İmamoğlu's tweet was posted under bad intentions. This is an act of goodwill. I think the real question that needs to be asked here is this. A majority of Kurdish people are in discomfort being linked with a supposed good party like this. If you listen to the public opinion, you see this very clearly. At the point the country has come to, if İYİ Party is still stereotyping people like this, even if it is unintentional, I think they form a very big example of irresponsibility to the public. Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır also commented on this issue through the lens of the Kurdish problem that has been long existing in Turkey. Portraying the importance of HDP involvement in Turkish politics, Ruşen Çakır stated that, if it were not for the HDP votes, Ekrem İmamoğlu would lose the elections. Behind the scenes of CHP's victory in Istanbul and many other cities underlies the voters of the İYİ Party and the HDP. However, while participating in this voting procedure, they voted without standing side to side. Here, Ekrem İmamoğlu united those two parties that refused to stand side to side, which I think was the right move. In fact, the reactions also show that it was the right decision, because taboos like these can only be broken through these soft and symbolic steps. Under the topic of March 8 International Women's Day, there are only 2 women who are leading political parties. If there were a third woman political leader, he would have included her name in the tweet as well. However, when he puts 2 names in the same statement under the aim of celebrating Women's Day, trouble arises.
Journalist Levent Gültekin has been attacked by a group of people in front of the Halk TV studios in Bakırköy, Istanbul. The attack occurred while he was heading to the channel for a program that he hosts together with his colleague Murat Sabuncu.
I was attacked by a group of 25 thugs in front of the channel. I'm okay right now. I'll tell you soon on the program, he wrote on Twitter. Gültekin's fingers were broken in the assault. In his Halk TV appearance after the attack, the journalist said prior to the incident, he had been receiving threats on social media from members of a political party allied with the government. He did not say the party's name. The ruling Justice and Development Party is allied with the Nationalist Movement Party. The MHP was associated with attacks in January on 2 journalists and a politician who criticized it. Prosecutors launched an investigation into the attack, and the police are gathering footage from security cameras at nearby shops to identify the attackers. In response to the attack, Justice Minister Abdülhamit Gül said in a television interview on TV station Habertürk TV that the government plans to take steps to improve security for journalists, without providing details, adding that journalist security is an important matter. According to the data shared by CHP Eskişehir MP Utku Çakırözer, at least 34 journalists were attacked in 2019 and 17 in 2020. Physical attacks on journalists have been rarely prosecuted in Turkey. 3,388 citizens wrote a statement of support for Gültekin, calling on the government to end the attacks on journalists by prosecuting the responsible parties. The statement read, "These threats are aimed at covering up the truth. Thus, they are against democracy and peace. This is not just an attack on me. This has happened to many journalists as well as opposition leaders. It proves that the state of law in Turkey no longer exists. The state does not fulfill its role, and individuals with a mob mentality have given themselves a new role in this context. These mobs have taken on the duty of shutting people up, scaring them so that they stop speaking the truth. They use threats, insults, and their fists to discourage us from speaking. This type of gang mentality has developed. These are not the acts of 3-4 apolitical young people, the vice chairs, metropolitan mayors, and MPs of a political party allied to the ruling AKP write thread messages filled with insults on their Twitter accounts. A young 20-year-old reads those messages and comes to his own conclusion. He is directed to attack journalists, politicians. This is an attack on Turkey, Turkey's democracy, Turkey's rule of law, to peace in Turkey. No country can sustain peace under the rule of a mob. Our leaders must get it together and make sure Turkey upholds the rule of law and change the language of politics.
A Turkish court has sentenced 5 people to life in prison over the 2016 assassination of Russia's ambassador to the country, Andrei Karlov. Turkish authorities say that Karlov's assassination was an act of provocation targeting Turkey-Russia relations and was carried out by the instructions of the Gülen network.
Andrei Karlov was fatally shot at a photo exhibition in the capital Ankara by an off-duty police officer on December 19, 2016. The gunman, Mevlut Mert Altıntaş, was later shot and killed by other officers at the scene. The gunman had claimed he wanted to punish Moscow for its support for the Syrian regime, which was then in the process of taking over Aleppo after an intense bombing campaign. Turkish prosecutors had concluded that the Gülenist network, led by US-based Muslim cleric Fethullah Gülen, was behind Karlov's slaying. 28 people were standing trial in the case, facing charges of premeditated murder with the intention of causing terror and being a member of a terrorist organization. The court sentenced 3 defendants to 2 separate life terms, while 2 others received 1 life term for membership of a terrorist organization, according to the state-run Anadolu Agency. 6 others were acquitted of all charges, the agency reported, after a trial that began in January 2019. The files of 9 fugitive suspects, including Gülen's, have been separated. Gülen, who has lived in the United States since 1999, has denied involvement in the Russian diplomat's assassination. Turkey is seeking his extradition, accusing Gülen of being behind the failed coup attempt of 2016.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.